Good morning, guys. I'm going to show you how to set up a MySQL ExpressJS setup with a starter Pokemon database. And then I'm going to connect to that database and fetch the Pokemon in a React project. So let's get started. First of all, the way that we're going to be installing our MySQL server is on a setup called Docker. So what you need to do is go to your web browser, look for Docker desktop, and then just download and install it. If you're a Windows user, just make sure you're Windows 10 Pro or above, and then everything else should work as expected. And then another bit of software that you'll need is the MySQL community server. So that will allow you to run, I believe, the MySQL CLI in your terminal or your command prompt. Just be sure to select the operating system that you use and then download the appropriate CPU version for your uh, development purposes. And then the next thing, we'll go ahead and download the MySQL Workbench. Of course, I've already have all these downloaded and installed, so uh, just to speed up this tutorial, that's what I went ahead and did. Now, when it comes to Docker, all you have to do is just start it up, make sure it works. Looks like we're good here. And yeah, we got the volumes, we got images, we have containers. So now what we can do is you can jump straight into it. So I'm going to hit Control tilde on the keyboard to bring up the terminal. It should work for both Windows and Mac, I believe. And then what we're going to do is we're going to, let's see here, we're going to go ahead and run this command right here to get MySQL server, sorry, to set up a Docker image with MySQL server 8.0.32. I'll be sure to include a link in the description. And also, all the commands that I run on here will also be in the description, so no worries. Go ahead and run this. And now it looks like we should be set up. So let's see how we're doing. Yep, MySQL is set up and running. Now, it went really fast for me because I already have the image for the MySQL server downloaded. This just basically set it up, and all we're doing is we're just specifying version, and that's it. We're not installing anything else, I don't think. So one thing to keep note of is that we have port 3307 and 3306. So when we call out to the MySQL server, we're going to be using port 3307. Just keep that in mind. And I'll, of course, walk you through it so you won't run into too many issues. So next what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get some information from our Docker container. So let's do docker ps-a. And we want the one for MySQL. So we'll copy from the names column, MySQL. Copy that. And then what we need to do is type in docker exec. We're going to root into the MySQL server -it MySQL /bin/bash. If you're a Windows user, you might not need the /bin/ you probably just need to type in bash and you should be good. All right, so now we're in the bash shell of our MySQL Docker container. So next, what you need to do is run MySQL -u root -p-a, and this will log us into the MySQL server for the first time. When it comes to the password, just type in anything. You're just going to set up one root password from the start. Let's see here. Oh, that's right. Password was set to root here. MySQL password, sorry. So yeah, you just type in root and that should work. There we go. Now we're in. Sorry, the password was set up. I just forgot that I had that written up there. But yeah. So anyways, just make sure that you after you do this, make sure you know that your users are visible. So select user host from MySQL.user, and you have to end it with the semicolon. So we got some users on here. We're going to create our own user. And again, I'll post the information description so you can type this in yourself. So we're going to create a user called trainer, identified by the password of password. And then we're going to grant all privileges. Probably don't normally want to do this to a MySQL user, but for demonstration purposes, we'll let it slide. And then now I believe, yeah, sorry, create user, and then we need to identify the user by password, but also we need to give it a percentage. And I believe that that allows us to access it from anywhere rather than just localhost. So I don't think I'd be able to log into root from somewhere else. I'd have to be actually in this container to log in as root for the MySQL server. So we need to make sure that the trainer is able to be accessed from anywhere that we want to. Of course, this is just going to be from our host system, so that shouldn't be a problem. Don't probably need to worry about any security vulnerabilities for that. So move on from there. And then we're going to grant all privileges again. And then we're going to flush privileges. And then we are going to check that our user is set up properly. And there you have it. We have a trainer that is accessible from localhost, and then we have trainer that is accessible from anywhere else. So we'll go ahead and hit exit to get out of our MySQL server, and then we'll get out of our MySQL server containers server itself. And then we're going to make sure that you might need to run this command to export your path in order to run the MySQL CLI on your Mac. Not sure about Windows, but yeah, just make sure that you have that this path added to your paths environment variable. And then I'm going to, of course, source my shell, ZSH, and then we're going to try logging into trainer. Again, I'll post the information description and should be identified by password that we set, which is just password in this case. And we should be in. So what we got here. Select user, host from MySQL user, and yeah, should be good. So now what we'll do is we will start our MySQL workbench. So MySQL Workbench. And I already have one created right here, but I'll create a new one. We'll call it Pokemon 2. So connection will be Pokemon 2. Host name will be the same. Port will need to be changed to 3307. Username will be trainer. And then store the password that we set up for trainer. Okay. So that should all be set up just fine. Hit OK. And now we should be good to go. So the next step will be to go ahead and create our database. So in MySQL Workbench, click on this cylinder icon right here. I'm going to create a new database. We'll call it starters. Sorry, Pokemon. And that looks good. Hit apply. Create schema. Yep. And close. So we should be able to set as our default schema. Yep. Once you see the tables and views and everything, now you know that the default schema is set to Pokemon. All right. And then I'll just go ahead and create a starters table. This will consist like of the 3 basic starter Pokemon that you normally get when you play the game. So run this. And then we'll go ahead and insert our data using the schema, this schema that we specified. Highlight the text and make sure you always end your statements with semicolons. So now we insert this data. So now it should be available if we do a select star from starters. And if we run this, as you can see, we have our Pokemon. And now that we have all of this set up and running, it's time to get to ExpressJS. So we can go ahead and exit out of here and return to our shell. All right, so first thing we'll need to do is create a server directory, and then we'll create a client directory. So make dir server, and this will contain our ExpressJS server. cd into that. And then we'll run the following commands: npm init-y. And then from there, you'll need to go into your file explorer, open package.json, and we're going to change the index.js to server.js just to make things a little less confusing. So basically, we'll have a file named server.js in our server folder that it'll reference instead of index.js. And then we'll use type modules. So we'll set type to module, since that's the new way of doing this kind of stuff. And then also, what we're going to do is we're going to set up our additional scripts that we'll be using. So start will be for our node server. And then dev will be for a nodemon server that we'll install a bit later. And now we should be good to go. Save. And then we'll go ahead and do some installation. So npm install express. npm install MySQL 2, npm install nodemon-d, and then should be good to go there. So we'll go ahead and start creating our setup in our server.js. So just touch server.js, and that should create our file. And then we'll just open that in VS Code. And we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll need to import Express, of course. And then set up a constant called app, which will reference Express. And then we'll import our create pull from MySQL 2. All right, these will be our connection details that come up next. And create a constant for connection. We use the create pull package that we imported. Host will be 127.0.0.1. User will be trainer. Password will be very secure. Password. Database will be our Pokemon database. And then, of course, we'll have to specify our port number since we're not using the default MySQL port 3306 because we're using port 3307. And then we're also going to need to specify our ExpressJS port. So const process.env.port. Oops, forgot to name it port const port process env port in all caps, and then or 9000. And I believe I haven't tried this out, but I believe the reason why we do this might be to run multiple ExpressJS servers. So if one's already got a 9000 port, I'm guessing this will be something else. But yeah. And we'll create our view engine. We'll set that for app view engine parameter. And then our second parameter will be EJS. All right, and then we'll then we'll go ahead and output data. And of course, what we're going to do is we're going to connect to the MySQL database. We're going to query it, and then we're going to output the query results in a JSON format. So bear with me. We're going to access our app variable again to object to get to the get function. We'll set the access / for this to API. So we'd go to localhost 9000 /API, and that would take us to our data that we're outputting, which are starter Pokemon. And then we're going to create function inside with a request and a response parameter setup. Now we'll create a function called PokeSQL. And we'll call the parameter Pokemon underscore ID. And we're going to return a new promise in this function. So return new promise. And then we'll call the parameter within our promise callback resolve. And within there, we'll set up our connection query. Query. What is it going to be using this connection right here? And then we're going to build our query builder, a basic query builder. So select from, we're going to select the name of the Pokemon from the starters table, where Pokemon underscore ID is equivalent to the Pokemon ID that we will be passing into it. So Pokemon underscore ID, and add a comma there at the very end outside of the quotes, because we're then going to use another parameter to check for errors. So inside of that will be another callback, I believe, and then we will set up a parameter for error and then row, so 2 parameters. So what will happen is if we do have an error, we'll throw it. And then if not, error, we will resolve row 0 at name. So this will, I believe this will basically help return the name of the Pokemon that we're going to try and access. And then we'll create another promise set dot all. I'm going to pass in 1 parameter with an array of 3 elements, and we'll call them PokeSQL. These will be our Pokemon. So we'll get our first Pokemon, and then our second Pokemon. And these are not, of course, in array indexes, we're actually passing parameters. So these are like our Pokemon IDs. So if we go back to our database, notice our Pokemon IDs are not indexed by 0, they're indexed by 1, because that's how IDs are added in here. So that's why I'm starting with 1 instead of 0. And then our third Pokemon. And then specify the Pokemon individually. So the first one will be Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. And this callback function will initialize the response. We'll format into JSON. And we're going to basically build up our JSON here just a little bit. So call the key for our array choices. And then we'll create our array for Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. Just copy that, paste that in. And then we will go ahead and set up our app listener, app.listener. listener. Actually, sorry, app.listen. Yeah. And then we'll pass in the parameter of port, which we declared earlier, and another callback function. This time we're using arrow notation, console, log, and then we'll just let the user know what port we're listening on. So server is listening on port of the port variable. Oh, that's right. You need to turn these into backticks. And then these, of course, are not single quotes. These are also backticks. So we need to do that in order to be able to access the variable from this Pokemon ID parameter. And we're doing the same thing here. So we're doing that to access our port variable. And of course, the way you do this is you place a string into 2 backticks, and then anything that you want to import as a variable in your string, you just hit $, and then open close curly braces, and then inside of that, put in the variable or variables. I mean, you can pretty much put anything in there, I think, so yeah, it should be good. All right, now that should be ready to go. So we'll save this. And we'll try starting our Express server. So npm run dev. It says it's listening on port 9000. So let's go ahead and see what happens. Localhost 9000. And then we'll have to specify API. And let's see. Queries not defined. Hold on, let me see here. Oh, it's our error. I misspelled that. Whoops. There we go. So that should take care of that problem. Now we should be in business. So as long as you don't have a spelling error, you should be good to go. And let's try this again. Ta-da! Now it worked. Okay, so without any spelling errors, you should be good. It's real easy to miss some details. Again, I'll post this on a GitHub repo so you can copy this exactly and paste into your server.js so you don't run into this issue of having to spell everything exactly correctly. So let's go ahead and now move on to our client. So we'll go ahead and split our terminal here. CD out of here, and then we'll create a client directory. CD into client. And now we're going to set up our React. Actually, take that back. We're going to do something slightly differently. Client. Come on. There we go. All right. I'm going to use vite to set up our client React server. So npm install vite. Whoops, sorry, not install vite. Let's just delete these. It's not what I wanted to do. npm create vite. All right, there we go. We'll call it client. That'll be our Vite project. We'll use React and plain JavaScript. CD into client, npm install. And then according to this, it should be ready to go. So we'll do npm run dev. Go to the localhost And there we go. So we have a React project set up. And now what we'll do is we'll just turn that off for now. Go to our client and let's clean up some stuff here just a bit. So let's see here. We'll want to remove, let's see, where do we want to remove stuff? I think we want to remove stuff within like the card class right here. So anything outside of this card class, let's just delete that. So this h1 and div tag here, and then everything within card. So the paragraph and button will go, and then we'll remove this paragraph tag at the bottom here. Nice. All right, so we should be ready to get started now. We don't need the React logo that Vite provides, and we won't be using our account. All right, so let's go ahead and set up our React server to access those starter Pokemon. So we'll need to add a use effect, webhook. And then we'll go ahead and create a useState variable. We'll call it backend data. And then we'll set the backend data. And that will equal useState. And then we'll use our use effect hook. And from inside there, we'll fetch our API. And don't worry, we will set up the full URL in a config file, which will point us to the localhost 9000 ExpressJS web server by default when we fetch. And then we'll get the response from that fetch. And with that response, we will make sure that it's converted into a JSON format. And then we'll take that data and we'll set our backend data to that. All right, so this should be good. So now our backend data should be set to data when we run our fetch. It's basically when we just load our page. And then we'll go ahead and put the code into our return statement so we can see what happens. So we'll make sure we get the type of either undefined or something to make sure that the data is loading properly. So if type of backend data says is equal to undefined, then what we'll do is we'll display a loading screen. If it is defined, we'll go ahead and load the data. So backend data choices. And then we'll have our choice data for each map that we map over, for each time we map over it, have an index. And then inside our p tags that we generate, we'll set the key for each of those to the index for that. And then, of course, we'll output our choice from the map parameter. And make sure app is exported by default. So it should be good. State, React. Yep. All right. So next thing we'll want to do is want to go to this file called vite.config.js. And from in here, we'll add another key value pair. Call it server. It'll be an object. And within that server object will be a proxy. And then within that proxy, we will declare our /API. This is what we're going to use with this key value to target the full URL of our ExpressJS server. So HTTP, localhost, and then on port 9000. And then change origin, set to true, secure. For now, will be set to false. All right, so I believe that should be it. See if everything works properly. And there you have it. Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle. Thanks for watching.